Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press conference at which we will hear the statements by the Prime Minister of the Republic of North Macedonia, Zoran Zaev, and by Mr. Philip Reeker, Acting Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of European Eurasian Affairs. We will have time for questions as well. Dear Acting Assistant Secretary of State at the State Department of the USA, my dear friend Philip Reeker. Dear Ambassador of the US to North Macedonia, dear representatives of the media, dear citizens. It gives me great pleasure to welcome high-ranking representatives of the U.S. State Department and our great friends who have added value to this event with their participation. This event that was dedicated to dialogue and good neighborliness as part of the drive to building a stronger and safer region. For us, it is very important that President Biden has announced a stronger presence and more engaged diplomacy by the U.S. in the Balkans in order to preserve the highest values that we share with our strategic partners. This gives me an opportunity to express my appreciation for the sincere and open support by the USA to our aspirations for prompt start of accession negotiations with the EU. Opening EU accession negotiations remains our highest strategic priority, so I take this opportunity to reiterate something which I believe is clear for Brussels, that bilateral issues have no place in the negotiating framework position upon which we agree with Mr. Philip Reeker. North Macedonia will not stop looking for a mutually acceptable solution with Bulgaria founded on European standards and values. We are committed to working in good faith to implement the friendship treaty with Bulgaria, including to accelerate the work of the Historic Commission, but there are issues that simply cannot be subject of negotiations. We have your support. The European Commission should find a solution to this issue and announce it at this autumn. We have U.S. support in this respect, and this is especially important. We all agree more than ever that it is time for Europeanization of the Balkans. This is a necessary prerequisite for our EU membership. Our long-term interest is to additionally intensify the already excellent political, economic, and cultural relations with the USA. Our strategic partnership agreement of 2008 is the foundation upon which we pursue even closer ties in many areas. There is great potential for investments by U.S. companies in North Macedonia. This is confirmed by about 10 U.S. companies that have invested hundreds of millions U.S. dollars in the technological and industrial zones in our country. North Macedonia and the USA, being close strategic partners and allies, are both focused on shared commitments to security, freedom, and democratic prosperity and to pursuing joint activities in the fight against terrorism and other threats to the peace globally. As of its first membership of NATO, North Macedonia proved itself as an active member of the alliance and that it shares all the values shared by all allies. We have proven ourselves as a reliable ally, contributing to the regional and to the global peace. As our closest ally and supporter, the U.S. has helped us in alleviating the consequences of the pandemic by strengthening the capacities of our healthcare system and by other donations. North Macedonia and the USA reaffirmed their shared commitment to building even stronger partnership and ally relations for in the name of prosperity of North Macedonia and the Western Balkans. Thank you, Mr. Reeker. The floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Dobar dan.
Good afternoon to everyone.
And thank you all for the opportunity to be with you today back in North Macedonia here on the shores of Lake Ohrid. I really do want to thank the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for arranging this remarkable Prespa Forum for dialogue, making this possible. And I'd like to, of course, offer my gratitude to all the people of North Macedonia for hosting us. And I want to thank Ambassador Burns and our fantastic team at Embassy Skopje. Always have a special place in my heart for all the work they did to make my visit and the visit of my deputy and our special representative for the Western Balkans, Matt Palmer, welcome here for these important days. Of course, it's always a special occasion for me to return to North Macedonia, having served here not once but twice, and a pleasure to come to Ohrid. We've missed these opportunities this past year, more than a year and a half during the pandemic, when it's been difficult to travel. Diplomacy, of course, relies on personal relationships, contacts. We can do a lot of that by Zoom, but we need to have direct engagement as well. And so this forum was needed, was very much needed. We had a good conversation, a series of conversations here, and it was remarkable to see the high-level turnout from countries from across the region, from European partners, bringing a momentum back, recalling and celebrating the Prespa Agreement, which is so historic in the annals of diplomacy, and being re-energized by this important diplomatic step. I can tell you that for me this is the final stop in a 2-week tour in Europe, most of that time with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was following on the footsteps of the President's trip, President Biden's trip to Europe. We were underscoring our dedication to the transatlantic relationship, to repairing where necessary, reinvigorating our alliances, and bringing new energy to the whole transatlantic concept, which is so important for dealing with the challenges we face coming out of COVID, climate change. I will note, too, that this year marks the 25th anniversary of United States North Macedonia diplomatic relations. And of course, I've been a part of that for all those 25 years. We really reflect on and celebrate the achievements of two countries, the United States of America and North Macedonia, in terms of what we have done in these past 25 years. I look forward to what we will accomplish in the next 25 years as well. As I noted in my remarks last night and again today, we also observed the 20th anniversary of the Ohrid Framework Agreement and recognize that agreement as important to North Macedonia's progress and where the country is today. I remember very well the work that went into that agreement, the efforts of President Tchaikovsky and others, all part of the incredible history of your country. the courageous diplomacy that North Macedonia has pursued in realizing the Ohrid and Prespa agreements, combined with a commitment to good neighborly relations. This is what helps shape the future trajectory of this Western Balkans region, which is so important, of course, to you, but to us as well. And that includes to President Biden, who knows this region, who has visited this region, who cares about this region. And so throughout this forum, we've discussed how we can further advance regional cooperation among the Western Balkans and its neighbors and neighborhood. Let me also congratulate North Macedonia as NATO's newest member on the recent one-year anniversary of joining the alliance. I was at the State Department when we went to extraordinary lengths in the early days of COVID protocols to receive the documents necessary to deposit them at the State Department as North Macedonia became ally number 30th in our North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And I just want to applaud your commitment to regional security and coordinated strategic defense efforts. Seeing Prime Minister Zaev at the table with President Biden and 28 other leaders was really an important moment, and I think we should all be proud of that. Because as NATO allies, we share a commitment not just to defend one another, but to work together with our partners, all of our partners, to make our world safer and more stable. North Macedonia is a contributor to global security, and we again thank you for your contributions even before becoming a NATO ally, as well as for your continued commitments, including the recent hosting of joint forces during the Decisive Strike 21 exercise. As the Prime Minister indicated, and as you've all heard, the United States' vision for the Western Balkans has been consistent, frankly, across multiple administrations and for decades. It is that of a region that is at peace with itself, with its neighbors, and fully integrated into European and Euro-Atlantic frameworks. The Biden-Harris administration is focused on building on existing efforts in the Balkans as part of the overall U.S. priority to revitalize and raise the level of ambition in the transatlantic relationship. I've emphasized here during this conference and in the many bilateral meetings that I had that North Macedonia is Europe. This is a European country. I fly here to Europe. And that's, of course, not just embedded in your history, but certainly in your geography. The EU accession process will help lay the foundation necessary for more prosperous, more peaceful times founded on fundamental values and democratic principles. We encourage, of course, EU member states to hold the first intergovernmental conferences with both North Macedonia and Albania, where I visited the day before yesterday. Without delay, they need to make good on their commitments. As part of the continuing U.S. support to aspirant countries on their EU paths, President Biden's recent executive order 14033, for those who are taking down the details, updates and modernizes the Western Balkans sanctions regime and reinforces our commitment to combating malign influence and corruption in the region by promoting accountability, one of the tools that the President has in his toolkit. We've also prioritized discussing economic and energy integration, as we do with other European countries. This is central to the region's future prosperity and preparation for EU membership. The United States strongly supports the Common Regional Market Initiative. Regional cooperation and economic integration are not just essential to the Western Balkans' post-COVID economic recovery, but also to the region's long-term competitiveness. And any opportunities to begin working in this way are useful. So I have no doubt, in closing, that this dialogue, this Prespa Forum dialogue, will constitute a truly important step in advancing regional cooperation. You and all the people of North Macedonia should be proud of this. I know we certainly are to be a part of it, and I just thank you. I thank all of our friends, and look forward to your questions. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Ви благодарам. Продолжуваме со прашања. Телма телевизија.
Thank you. We continue with the questions. Telma Television. Tamara, you can have the floor. Thank you. My question goes to Mr. Reeker. You mentioned the increased engagement of the U.S. in the way in which it is going to be done here as this support. Mr. Palmer was here yesterday, and if I'm not mistaken, he mentioned that the efforts for the region to re-enter the transatlantic union need to be increased. He said, how is the U.S. going to assist the region when it comes to the when we take into consideration the hiatus in and the standstill in the integration into the European Union? No one mentioned anything around the dispute between North Macedonia and Bulgaria, which is keeping our country outside of the European integration. You mentioned also the expansion of the sanctions by President Biden when it comes to corruption. When is this list going to be expanded, and who is going to be on that list from North Macedonia? Thank you very much.
Questions, because I think these were topics that were discussed here at the forum over these last 2 days, and certainly in the bilateral meetings that I had, that Deputy Assistant Secretary Palmer had. As you know, we welcomed very much the EU's decision to open accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania in March last year. I personally issued statements about that, a sign of both countries' significant progress in implementing the reforms necessary for EU membership and a better society, a better Europe. North Macedonia's EU accession would, of course, facilitate increased regional stability and political and economic connectivity in Europe and in the transatlantic partnership. And that's why it's been a crucial element of U.S. foreign policy, as I said, for many, many years. This current roadblock of North Macedonia's EU accession path damages the EU's credibility in the region and, frankly, internationally. It hurts our collective ability to advocate for reforms throughout the region, and I think sends the wrong signal and reinforces further some perception that the Western Balkans, or in the Western Balkans, that the European Union is leaving the region behind. I don't believe that's the case, but that's why we support opening of EU accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania without delay. I think we've made that abundantly clear in all fora, and that's what we'll continue to look at as we continue to work on so many other joint efforts, whether it's energy security, diversification, economic opportunity. We are, as President Biden has said, emerging from a global pandemic, and we have opportunities, but also great challenges to do that and rebuild our economies, all of our economies, keeping in mind the opportunities to focus on green energy, to focus on innovation, technology, as we also focus on security. As a NATO ally, North Macedonia is in a wonderful position to be seen as a country of stability, tied to the most successful military and political alliance in history. And that means there are great opportunities here, and we will just continue pushing to see all of those opportunities fulfilled. In the United States, of course, I think North Macedonia has a friend like no other. And then you asked a question, the second part of your question was regarding the executive order, which, as I indicated, is an update from older executive orders. In fact, it's great. It actually includes reference to the PRESPA agreement, as well as the Ohrid agreement, and the importance of those agreements to stability and the progress we've seen in this region. And of which the United States is very proud to have been a part, it explicitly takes on those who engage in corrupt practices in the region, and that can include misappropriation of public assets or expropriation of private assets for personal gain, and it gives the president, again, an initial, stronger, more updated tool to use as we look at our interests and the interests of our friends and allies in the region. I can't tell you when or who or how that tool may be used, but it is a tool, it is a signal from the President, from the administration, of the seriousness with which we take this. You've heard President Biden talk about combating corruption as being one of his top priorities in foreign policy around the world, but that includes here as well. And we'll continue to stress that because it's those kinds of reforms that will lead to better opportunities, greater confidence, and more prosperity for all citizens. Thanks.
Ana, Медиумска информативна агенция, повелете.
Can I have some assistance, please? Mickoski announced today that he will put forward a resolution next week on the Macedonian positions in the negotiations with Bulgaria or the protection of Macedonian positions, and he called upon the government to accept it. In the country, he would say that this would mean that the government is negotiating identity. What's your position on that, and what's your position on Mickoski's statement? Okay, I'll answer this in this way, even to those who are not too much aware of that. Think to all democratic world, all the countries in the region are aware what is being negotiated, and they're clear that the Macedonian language and identity are outside of the negotiating framework. And I'd also add that there's a new exact science called logics, in which I'm talking about as a science. It speaks on human thought and way of thinking, or the position of Mr. Mickoski and his behavior, blaming me for Bulgaria's veto and blaming me for for betraying Macedonian language and identity are two things that are mutually conditioned. Is far removed from healthy logics. We have always been transparent, and we have during the process, and will continue to be transparent. We have no dilemmas on negotiating anything with the opposition, and we'll continue to do that. But first and foremost, we'll continue protecting national interests from all possible aspects, from the aspect of what we have been doing to this date in protecting our identity, our language, our Macedonian language, and our separate identity as Macedonian nation, and by protecting national positions due to the goal of finding a solution that will not be placed on, and I have to assure you that nothing that is holy for us, and this is our Macedonian language and identity, will not be put forward for negotiation. And our intention is through negotiations, through direct talks, to achieve our strategic goals. Our first goal of NATO has already been achieved. Let's try to do that for our second strategic goal, becoming a member state of the EU. In such circumstances, I can only repeat that in Bulgaria we did not discuss Macedonian language and identity. Actually, within the Bulgarian statement, you can see that there's nothing on that issue, seeing as it was addressed by the Portuguese EU presidency. And when Bulgaria discusses it, it is an issue of Bulgaria and Europe too. And when we discuss it, the EU tries to protect all identities, including our own. And this is what Europe has been doing to this date. Actually, Bulgaria actually states that it accepts the reality of the existence of a Macedonian nation and language, but we discussed on the roadmap according to which we define the areas or institutions that are tasked to improving the efficiency in the cooperation between our two countries, as well as the intensity and dynamics of the Historical and Education Committee, how often they would meet and how they would find solutions, and how often they would discuss such solutions, solutions that would make us friends, of course. Minister Bujar Osmani also discussed these things on the non-involvement in domestic affairs. We discussed declarations that our parliament adopted in as early as 2006 on condemning abuses that took place towards certain victims within the period from 1945 to this date, including all citizens with all sorts of ethnic affiliation in our country. You mentioned the language. The formulation used is that we have similar but different internationally recognized languages. Channel 5 TV, Jana, you can have the floor.
Thank you. A question for Mr. Reeker. Macedonia and the USA signed the Strategic Partnership Agreement in 2008. If the European perspective of the country does not improve in the forthcoming period, are you planning to expand the scope of this strategic agreement? And if yes, what forms of expansion would those be?
I remember very well the U.S. strategic partnership that we signed in 2008 after the Bucharest summit. But of course today, 2021, and since 2020, we are more than partners, more than strategic partners. We are allies. And the United States' closest possible relationships, the closest relationships that the United States has are with our treaty allies. As a member of NATO, we cannot have a closer relationship. And for that, I'm very grateful. Our country is very grateful. We're very proud to see that. So I think we are strategically, when it comes to defense, economic opportunities, values, what we do together in a transatlantic context is so strong and powerful that, again, we are allies, and there is nothing closer than that bond, including Article 5 about mutual self-defense. And we're very proud to use that as an important basis for our relationship.
Ви благодарам, овде ја завршуваме пресконференција.
Thank you. With us conclude the press conference. Have a nice day.